Hello and welcome to this week's review on the My Hero Academia Vigilantes manga chapter titled A Sky With No Rain Left. And we kick off this review as we always do with these reviews by talking about the positives and the headline positives, the big things I'm discussing over the course of this video. I loved the story and the writing at play here. I thought the artwork was fantastic and I liked how the present day scene works. Now, whilst the anime has already adapted this part of the story, I will be not making reference to anything that happens there and in the next episode, which is, I think, the last of the stuff that has been adapted from the manga to the anime. I might make some comparisons in terms of execution, but that's about it. As far as this is concerned, we're only talking about the manga, and I will just say this is my second time recording it. I recorded this review about a week ago, and it's only coming back to editing it that I noticed I accidentally put the echo on my microphone again. So here we are, and we'll kick off this review by saying that in time-honoured tradition, when it comes to my reviews on this channel or broadcast on the radio, let us eliminate any pretense and just get right to the point. I bloody love this chapter. This is probably one of my most favourite that I've read in this entire manga series. And after reading this chapter, I'm starting to wonder if this story arc about going into Erizawa's backstory, whether or not this is one of the best superhero stories that I've read, full stop. Now, I will be honest, I don't think it will top Judge Dredd America. I think that is one of the best comic book hero storylines I've ever read. That's in a whole other league, but I will say is that this storyline does feel it has greater rereading potential. With that said, I will just say that I think that this storyline has worked better in the manga, more so than in the main series, as there's a couple bits here and there that do feel as though it gives this an edge. Little bits and pieces I don't remember seeing within the anime and might well have been cut for time, or at the very least were better executed here. The anime adaptation felt more like an anime telling of this story, which, you know, well, duh. But here it feels as though there's a little bit more time to tell elements of the story, giving us a little bit more insight into aspects of the character's life at this particular moment. Like, I like the brief scene that we get with Biff, the character that I call Biff, and Eraserhead training. I like that there's this sense of this lead up to the big school tournament, and it creates this sense that life went on. Despite the horrific realities of what Eraserhead and his friends went through, life went on, their schooling went on, their academia went on, which adds this uncomfortable element of reality to it, that even though we'll have these moments where we will lose people in our lives, as much as we deep down may want it to be otherwise, the world keeps turning, life keeps going on, other people keep going on about their lives, and yes, what we're seeing is, let's be blunt, a cut down look at the aftermath of all of this, but obviously that was going to be the case because this isn't a spin-off of Eraserhead and his friends in high school. As such, they can't quite get into the level of depth and minutiae that I personally would have liked here, but jumping to that final year does give an effective wrap-up for this storyline as much as possible, and helps us get more of a comprehensive look as to how Eraserhead's life has progressed leading up to this moment, and thereafter the present day in this manga series and the present day in the main series. And it isn't really the kind of progress that you'd think that it would be, and that's one of the elements I do like about it. You'd expect the death of his friend to be the thing that made him a, quote, better hero, at least in an academic sense. So over the past couple chapters, it has been told to us in different forms that Eraserhead was just kind of an average student, slightly above average at that, with the big subjects that he struggled with being the stuff related to PR and being as a face in the hero industry and with combat. And whilst there is still sense that there are struggles here, you would think that, you know, he would grow into this and he'd be far more competent and confident in those areas, and that isn't the case. Arguably, there's a case to be made that he might have gotten worse. When we have the check-in with the teachers and they talk about how much work, how he's just kind of gone from the last time we had this talk, he's gone to this point where he just kind of coasts. He does the bare minimum needed to pass and not a little bit more. The only thing that he's really excelling at is the stuff to do with combat-related matters, and anything beyond that, like I say, he's working to get the minimum grade, and he just kind of keeps himself there. Which to be blunt, is a bloody gamble. That is really something you should not be doing in your academia. You should always be trying to push a little bit further just so that you have that extra bit of wiggle room and that extra bit of freedom, but we do know that it works for him. It's not something that I would ever recommend for anybody going into academia, regardless of the level. Do the work and do as best as you possibly can do, for goodness sake. You know, I've been there thinking, okay, I've just done enough, and then discovered to my horror, no, Chris, you really, really haven't. And beyond this, it's still, as far as the context of this world being, it's still a gamble for him, because as he's talking to his teacher points out to him that he's effectively trying to become a bounty hunter now, and that decision doesn't just come out of left field. It makes sense in the context of the character and what he's been going through. It reflects this fact that he probably still blames himself for not saving Loud Cloud, and that is reflected in how he's focusing so much on improving his combat and his hero skills relating to combat more so than the other stuff and the other aspects of his studies. And that makes sense. He's probably blames himself for what happens, and that's why he's going through this. I do wish there was a little more within the text itself to suggest that that was the case. I mean, it's something that isn't hard to come to that conclusion, but it is one of those cases where it feels like a little bit more here would have helped to better solidify that as far as the text itself is concerned. But, like I say, this is a snapshot at a very particular point in time. Whilst it does feel like a summary, it does do enough, but I do think that more should have been done here and there. And I think that certain creative aspects here, well, we'll talk about them later on. There is this distinct bittersweetness to so much within this chapter, and this truly comes to a head when we get that part in the story where Koichi and the big lads and the Recycloppers are making all these big plans for the future, and they're talking about how they're going to create this big cafe for people with quirks that make it hard for them to fit in with society, and it's this sweet little thing. And then we get that moment where Eraserhead looks back at them, and we have that flashback to him and his friends on the roof, planning on what they'll do when they're pro heroes, planning out what their office is going to look like and what they're going to have there. And it's the kind of conversation that a lot of us had with our friends when we were teenagers. Even if deep down we knew that we'd never be working together, and even if deep down we knew that that was never an aspect of us, there was always that thing where we would talk about what we were going to do if we were going to get into doing music or doing performance or even just a regular 9-to-5 thing. You know, you had those plans together, and given everything we know of Eraserhead, it has that extra sense of tragedy here. And the reason for him being as distant as he is and dismissive towards these characters isn't because he doesn't want to be around them, but he still has difficulties within himself that he just hasn't made peace with. He can't really allow himself to be part of that group, or really with other social groups, because it reminds him too much of the stuff that he lost. But he still, in fairness, does not cut himself off to them, I should say, because he does have that thing at the end of the chapter where he says about, oh, I'll come back and visit from time to time. And that's cute. It shows that whilst he can't be with them as far as a friend, he still wants to be there for them regardless. And I do like that aspect of it. And it adds this sense of just sweetness to the entire thing, because I remember reading this part in the manga about a week or so ago from when I'm recording this, and just reading that part where we have that flashback was really emotional for me. Not just because of what happens within the context of the episode, but I'm thinking back to my time as a teenager when I'd talk about and discuss these kind of things, and just seeing how these things don't always come to be, and yet still you hope that they can be, and you're still trying to do your best as far as these things are concerned in your main life. And there is a part of me that wonders, in the context of this episode and in the context of where his story goes from here, if this is not the moment where he decided to become a teacher. Because we need to remember that the start of this storyline, the start of this story arc, was when he was getting called by Midnight, and she was talking about how she was going to be starting at UA, and about how President Mike had already been starting there. And maybe it's this whole sequence of him thinking back to his time in high school, which made him decide to do that. And I will say is that when I did my original recording of this, and this is a question that I've been considering myself, and I might do a video on it, is I saw a thread online about what would have happened and how would it affect the story had Loud Cloud survived to the main series, and it's one of those aspects where I think that to not cut myself off from something I might do in a couple months' time, I still think that Eraserhead would have become a teacher in the end, but I still think that there was aspects of his personality that needed addressing, but that's a whole other thing. But at least as far as his story is concerned, it feels like this is the moment, this sequence of events is what nailed down in his life that he wanted to become a teacher, so that he could be the person that enables this kind of optimistic, forward-looking, just mindset in other people, because his involvement with these other characters has allowed them to do that, and he might well be imagine himself being in a similar kind of position as a teacher, and hoping to be in a position where he can prevent other students from having to go through what he did, I should say. And I really do love that. And the artwork that we get here really does help to take that to the next level. The montage that we get of his life leading up to the events of Vigilantes is great. Again, I don't want to get into a thing about comparing the manga to the anime, but the way the manga does it, it's a double-page spread with Eraserhead spread across. It's a headshot of Eraserhead across both pages, and around him in just these little bubbles is just the progression of him growing as a hero, growing as an independent hero, leading up to the bit towards the beginning of this series. And I like how that is done. I think that is a far more visually interesting way in doing it than just having a montage within the show with a little bit of stock music playing in the background. And as I've mentioned before, and as I will mention in the next review, because I've already recorded that because of reasons already discussed, I love how expressive all the artwork is here, and it ends up creating a great sense of personality with these characters that I don't think the main series has ever managed to get a grasp on, and it really does help to sell those moments, especially when we get to the present day stuff where everything is just so... It has this, and I understand that people might not like it when I say this, but Vigilantes, when it is... It can have these moments where it just has this goofy warmth and charm about it. These more slice-of-life elements that we get here are really elevated by having such an expressive art style, so that when you have the bit with the big lads discussing their plans and fooling around with this little kitten that they've now adopted from the crawler, it's cute and it's fun and it has its great sense of personality there, and it just... That whole sequence where we've got these mutant monster guys planning on opening a cat cafe that's meant... Well, it's originally just meant to be a cafe for big people like them, people who have quirks that give them abnormal body types, heteromorphs like them. Well, I mean, they're not technically heteromorphs, they've had horrible experiments put onto them, but you get the idea. And it's... Also, they see the kitten, they say, oh, we'll also make it a cat cafe thing, so we'll get even more clientele. And all that stuff is cute and fun, and it's that wonderful juxtaposition between these scary monster guys and the idea of having these cute little kittens staying with them. And it's fun, and I do enjoy that, and the artwork here really plays into just the almost absurdity of it in a genuinely fun and endearing way. And all that warmth here is done in such a way where it does feel that it does not undermine the dramatic stuff we've just had, and it also helps to create that sense, I feel, in Eraserhead's mind, helping him to formulate his decision to become a teacher. Because we have that moment towards the end of this chapter where he talks about how the sky's cleared now, and whilst there is a heavy dose of dramatic irony there, it's him coming to the realisation that despite everything that he's endured and everything he endured as a teenager, there's still some light and good and hope left within the world, and that he can contribute to that in a way that doesn't require him to just be a hero. It can also be done with him being a teacher and being a role model for future students. And I really do like how all of this is put together. It's him coming to a conclusion in such a way that, yes, we understand that's the direction of going in from the main series, but it's done in such a way where it isn't just him explicitly saying, this is the day that I decided to become a teacher, or anything like that. You get the idea that this is around the time that he came to that conclusion, due to him thinking back on those past memories and realising what else he can do for the world than just beating up bad guys. With all that said, however, let us get into the negatives, and first off, and this is something I'll just touch on briefly because I don't think it is the biggest of issues here, I think that the Ed's flashbacks, this entire wrap-up to the flashback, I think it skipped a bit too much. Yes, it's a snapshot at a very particular point in time, but it feels like a summary in a way that I don't like. It feels like a summary which exists to line up the furniture, so to speak, to put all the ducks in a row so that we do get the Eraserhead that we know today. That it's making those very deliberate plays to make sure that the Eraserhead that we know from the main series is the one that we are effectively seeing at the end of this flashback sequence. It's like when you get an adaptation of a pre-existing series being made into a TV series. It's like the case of, and I don't like talking about tropes and TV tropes and that kind of thing, it's the surf vampire thing. I think that's the name of the surf vampire. Back in the 70s and 80s, there'd be a TV show called Surf Vampire, where every week Surf Vampire would do some surfing. But if you were to do that as a Netflix program today, Surf Vampire would only surf in the final episode of a 12-episode run. And this feels like a similar kind of thing where, whilst we have hints to him becoming Eraserhead that we know, it's only really in this final part of it that he becomes the Eraserhead we know, and it's done in such a way where it feels like we have to get to this conclusion. This is the end result that we need. Because Vigilantes has this odd thing where it seems to never want to show a genuinely earlier part of these heroes. The only closest thing that we've got to this thus far is Fat Gum having a little bit of extra body armor on him with his design. Everyone else just looks more or less the same they do in the main series. No one looks any younger, no one has any especially different costumes, and this is a similar kind of thing where this character, Eraserhead, is functionally the same from high school as it is at this point where he'll be in his late 20s, and the main series where he's in his early 30s. And whilst I understand and an argument can be made that Eraserhead as a hero isn't that much different to Eraserhead as a normal guy and as he was as a high schooler, and you could make the argument that everything he endured in high school might have put him into something of a state of arrested development, but all the same, it's desperate. It really does feel like a case of he has to be Eraserhead by the end of this storyline, so we have to include all the quirks and facets of his personality by the end of this storyline, otherwise people aren't going to understand that this is how he became Eraserhead. Look, he naps now. This is a thing he does in the main series. He fights like he does in the main series. He's starting to look like the main series version of himself, and the version that we see of him at this point in this particular series where he's got the scruffy goatee stuff. And now he's leaving to join the main series. Wow! And it does this stuff in a way which feels like it's incredibly forceless and guileless. Like, there was a deliberate effort made to explain the origins of the goggles that he wears. But every other element that makes up who Eraserhead is as a hero, at least from an aesthetic point of view, and just as far as a personality point of view, just feels less intelligent and less creative. Like, within this, it just saying it, and I'm having to go off my notes slightly because I miswrote something and misunderstood something. We know that he naps at this particular point in the story because he trained so heckin' hard at high school. When in the main series he does that because he's a hero that mostly operates at night, and now he has a day job, so yeah, he's going to sleep during the day. That makes sense. But him doing it at school makes less sense and is harder to justify, in my opinion. It feels like a case of, oh, doesn't he sleep at home? Because UA didn't have dorms at this point, so what does his parents think about him spending all his spare time training to goodness knows what hours? Like, again, in the main series, the sleeping bag gag makes sense. It implies, and we know, that he's a hero that fights mostly at night, so he just falls asleep during class. He'll give the class a task to do, he'll then have a nap whilst they're working on it, or during a break time he'll have a nap. Makes sense, it's a fun little gag. Here, they're doing that now and establishing that now as a fact of his personality because that's just what he does when he's older. And yes, you could make the argument, and it does justify itself slightly in the fact that he's training as hard as he is, therefore he needs to sleep more, but it still feels like a very guileless way of showing, look, he's doing the thing, and I just don't like that. I mean, we aren't quite getting into the whole Star Wars thing of remember X-Wings, remember AT-ATs, well, here they are again, but it does border on it. Like, we didn't need a big origin moment for the origins of the sleeping bag or why he sleeps as much. It's a byproduct of the training. But it still feels like a case of we had to have a shot of him with the sleeping bag because that's what he'll do when he's older. It feels like a very guileless origin story thing that you would expect to see in any given superhero movie of the past 16 years. We know this character is famous for doing this thing, so we are now going to put this thing in the story in a way which just says, hey, remember this, and I don't like that. Whilst, again, they do justify it in itself to be part of the story, I don't think it works anywhere near as well as it really should do, sadly, and it does undermine it. Like, you could have avoided the napping thing. You could have avoided a lot of this stuff. You could have avoided him looking exactly the same as a hero as he does in the main timeline, as he does as a teenager, even just by changing his costume slightly. Have a little bit of, like, I don't know, like knee pads or something, or elbow pads, just something else to justify it. Like, it doesn't, whatever. I'm going to start going around in circles as the review is going on far enough. Now into the overview and say that I think that this is a very solid episode, and despite my issues with the whole, it does feel a little bit too much in the flashback of remember this thing, I still think it's good for what it is, and it still justifies this stuff, even if it does feel like it's very uncreative in how it does it. But nonetheless, this is a strong, emotive end to a very great storyline. And with that said and done, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner. I've got the fan on, so if you hear any weird buzzing in the background, it's that, but this won't take too long. Our comment comes from Big X1, who says, while the anime does change the order of things, I still think the manga does it slightly better, mostly because things don't look so grey. I know why it is, given that it takes place during a storm, but it was too drab in the anime. Like the Sky Egg part you talked about in the anime review for those episodes, thank you for your comment, and I've not had any major issues with the visuals in the manga, I'll be honest with you. I mean, yes, it was a bit drab within the anime, but I can understand why it is, both from, like you say, a simple fact it's taking place during a storm, but also there's the dramatic irony of it all, given just how dark and serious all this is. But more generally, I've just been enjoying reading the manga, just seeing how much more expressive the art style is. I've really been liking it. In any case, let me know what you all thought about this episode of this chapter down in the comment section down below. You will be read out in a future video. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!